Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Afrikan Diaspora Dialogue Podcast. I am your host and moderator, Jamal, and we appreciate you guys for watching the show, and we hope that you come away from this episode knowing a little bit more and being able to apply some of the things that we talk about to your everyday life. I am going to start by introducing my lovely cast of panelists. We have from the wonderful country of Guinea, Mariama Sadio. We have from the Netherlands, by way of Suriname, Kim Dankoor. We have all the way from East Atlanta, Mr. Lawrence. We have representing Peru, Miss Sharun Gonzales, and we have our sister from Trinidad and Tobago, Kaysia. How are you all doing today?
Great.
We're doing good.
Yeah, I'm doing good.
All right. So what I wanted to do, so today's topic is really talking unity. So Afrikan Unity Initiative is our nonprofit organization, and we do work to really try to bring tangible Pan-Africanism to people, because a lot of people don't believe that it's possible. So today we're talking about what unity is and how it looks to each of us, and how can it benefit us, going forward as a people, and why it may be necessary. So the first question I want to ask people is, do you feel that people know enough about the Black population from your home country? And we'll start with Mariama, and just think about what you believe people have access to from where you're from, and then go ahead and answer. Yama.
So good morning, everybody. And based on I travel a little bit. So I met few people, and I try to see how well people knows my country. And in my country, we have limited access to like information and to some type of development that is not open to everybody else. So the communication and the openness in the other world is limited. And since I start traveling, meeting people, I realized that when you say Guinea, people refer more to New Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, or Guinea-Bissau, not the real Guinea, the Republic of Guinea. And that information circulated because my country is not that exposed, is not enough exposed on the value, on the richness, on the other world. So I believe it's really limited on the knowledge of people of my home country, and and more in the States. Like less than 10% of the people are met New Guinea.
Tell them, like what countries have you been to that didn't know about Guinea? Where have you been?
So I went to the Philippines. I went to the Philippines, and nobody knew Guinea from the Philippines. And to the States here, the people I talk to, there's not much of them that know Guinea. And the hilarious part, some people that I talk about, because I did ride share for one moment. So I met a lot of people while I was driving. And most of the time when I say I'm from West Africa, some people think that West Africa is a country. And I did not understand that, because it's a side, like the first side of the how you say that, the Cap Point Cardinal.
The continent.
So it's a side of a continent, but it's kind of some type of ignorance that is there, and like people not that opens to know what it is. And even in Africa itself, like I was in Morocco in one moment, they call us on the south side of Africa, all the countries on the south, the African. Something like Morocco is not a part of Africa. They call all Black people African. And that was some type of thing that was disturbing. And I was asking those people, where you think Morocco is? So to call us African, that means you're not African. But do you know what continent Morocco is? So
yeah, that's an interesting take, and I don't think a lot of people really understand, even within the continent of Africa, all the disparities and the distinctions that people create amongst themselves. So we'll definitely circle back around to that and see how that feeds into other things. But we'll go to Kim with the same question. Do you think that
Yes.
people know enough about the Black population in the Netherlands?
Yeah, the Black population, just going to specify to
What would you like them
Sudanese
to know?
people. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes. So
And I
as it
said,
relates to the to Sudanese people, like my social or my ethnic group, I do think that people in the Netherlands know something about Surinamese people, but not enough. They know that the Dutch people colonized Suriname in the 1700s, so they know somewhat the terroristic relationship, I want to say, between Dutch people and Surinamese people, and you do get some type of history in the Dutch educational system, but I do think it can be a little bit more, though. It's usually like 1 or 2 paragraphs, and I do think that moment in history deserves and needs more attention, because I think that people from the Netherlands would understand more why certain groups are fighting for more rights right now, because it's an interesting time over here. You have people who are actually trying to how do you say that, combat a lot of injustices over here, like discrimination on the housing market, on the job market. So we have a lot of discussions about discrimination right now, but I do feel that ethnic Dutch people would understand it more if they knew more about the history. But it's always funny when I travel abroad, especially to the United States. I have the most interesting conversations with people when I tell them where I'm from. So
right.
I always start with the Netherlands because I was born and raised here. So some of the
Mm-hmm.
times people think that the Netherlands is actually a country in South America or in the Caribbean because of my skin color. So like, oh yeah, the Netherlands, yeah, I've heard about it. Is it like somewhere in South America or in West Africa or in the Caribbean? I'm like, no, it's next to Germany. You're not close at all. And then sometimes when I try to explain that my parents are from Suriname, I never, yeah, okay, I maybe met like 2 people out of the 120 people that actually knew about the country of Suriname. So that's always interesting.
Yeah, and so far, what we've found out is that we don't learn geography in the U.S. So let's go with the same question to Lawrence. Do you think that know about Black people from your country?
Can you hear me now? I mean, really. Yeah. So basically, as you say, it largely is a geography thing, or in terms of the deficits of knowledge in the country. In terms of having knowledge about Black people, um, do the people know about from my own home country know enough about the Black population? Not really. Because the history, one for one, is not necessarily taught within the context of African people or Black people necessarily. So a lot of those gaps get put in place, right? And I know even from me personally, I mean, when you're looking at just the demographic or whatever where people are located, you may know more so about certain like chocolate cities as they're termed or whatever, whether it's Atlanta or DC or whatever, and that type of thing, and certain ways that people move in those areas. But by and large, I mean, it's not you if you're not I noticed that a large portion of the population, a large portion of the people, with especially the young people that I've dealt with, if they're not really taken and exposed to something, then they're not really necessarily going to reach for it. So I mean, I find we have a pretty limited scale and scope. So like if you're a LA cat or whatever, then a lot of times you'll understand how LA people or whatever move. But in that context, it may or may not necessarily go according to the color lines. It seems like we're having more and more of a different paradigm shift, if you will, when it comes to education and splitting our resources amongst the races, if you will. But nah, we don't know enough. We definitely don't know enough. Part of it is just a willingness, but not having really a connectedness to other people around you. And because I mean we were very diverse. It was I forget who it was. I think it might have been Biden or somebody or whatever was
It
saying
was
something
Biden.
to the effect of like they were comparing like I think the Black population, the Hispanic population. Yeah, and was saying how unlike the Black people or whatever, how such and such whatever is diverse, whatever, whatever. And I'm like, that's being a part of the population. Like you can see how and going to Morehouse and whatever, being in Atlanta, you see the levels of the diversity. You see the stratification of our people, or whatever. So it's definitely little silos of people, just some over here, some over here, but you don't really have an entire, what I'm saying, connected connection about the population in their home country. That's not really something that's promoted here in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, we know that about the US, and it's just interesting being from here and knowing all the things that constantly are happening. So we're gonna move on to Sharon. Do you think that people know enough about Black people in Peru?
Definitely not. I think there are two ways of answering that question. First,
Hmm.
if people from abroad know enough about Black people in Peru, I don't think so.
Right.
Uh, it's like every time I say I'm from Peru, the first thing that comes to mind is Machu Picchu, right? Which is the biggest indigenous heritage we have in the country. And yes, we're
Mm.
proud of that. Um, but then it's hard for people to imagine that uh, there's Black people as well in this country.
Right.
Um, so I've been through so many. I have so many stories. But I've even met like people from Spain that wonder how I speak so well Spanish, for instance. And
Mm.
I'm like, because I'm from Peru, and they're like, but you're Black, or yeah. So people don't expect that. I feel like me being Black and being Peruvian outside of Peru generates this
Hmm.
dissonance. Like people have a hard time grasping that idea. So that on one hand, and then in Peru, I go through similar experiences. Though I think part
Hmm.
of the experience of being Black in Lima, which is my hometown, is the capital of Peru. It's people constantly asking you, where are you from? And I think that's
Mm.
crazy. Like other Peruvians asking a Peruvian like myself, where am I from? uh, has always made me feel like I'm out of place. Like my nationality is
Right.
not really a huge thing of my identity because I'm othered even within my own country. So
Right.
I don't think Peruvians know enough about Black people either. I want to say it's changing. We have gained
Hmm.
visibility in the last couple of years, but we still have so much to learn. Like we
Right.
know that Black people are in sports. We know that Black people are artists, like if you look at the soccer team, at the Peruvian soccer team, most of them are black. They look of African descent. And then
Right.
you check the most famous Peruvian artists, some of them are probably black as well, but then still it's hard for Peruvians to understand that black people are in our everyday lives. We are there.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that, feeling that element of feeling out of place in your own country, in the country that you were born in, is something that I believe African Americans can definitely identify with, because it's constantly, put in our face that we are other, and it is lived like that. So that's an interesting, element that is even a link. So when we talk about unity, we always look to find small little elements that can link us, even link our experiences to one another in any form. And we'll ask that question to Kaysia to finish off. And then, like, from your perspective, you're from Trinidad. So do
Hmm.
you feel like people know enough about Black people in Trinidad,
So to answer
like
that question,
from
I'll
the
start.
context of inside of Trinidad and outside?
Okay. To answer that question, I'll start at first by saying Breonna Taylor, just inserting that. Moving on,
Definitely.
I feel like a lot of people don't know. I will travel throughout the United States, and depending on the area, if it's a heavily populated Caribbean area, then yes,
Hmm.
somebody would know and say, okay, well, yeah, I know about Trinidad, I know about Carnival. So because Carnival, we have a very
Right.
large Carnival here, they would know about just at least a little bit of that. They may not know the history
Hmm.
or may not know all of the various elements of Carnival, but at least they know
Hmm.
that much. Depending, again, in places like Atlanta, in places like New York, where there are heavily populated areas that have a lot of Caribbean people. Outside
Hmm.
of that, whenever I say I'm from Trinidad, people are like, "Oh, is that in Africa?" I was like, well, there are
Mm.
African people there, but no, that's not where we're from. And then I personally experienced where, so I'm speaking like this now, where I have my accent, my Trinidad accent, but I would have to then switch to American accent, and for people to understand me and people to realize that I'm just like them. We're the same. We have the same background, and these are Black people, and so
Hmm.
I would say that within the context of the United States, that not a lot of people know about Trinidad or know about where it's located. Although we are
Right.
the one of the richest Caribbean islands in the Caribbean islands. Um,
Hmm.
I would say in my travels outside of the US, when I've gone to Mexico, when I've gone to Kenya, when I've gone to um, Ethiopia, even, people know Trinidad. They would say, "Oh, Trinidad y Tobago," and I correct them and say, "No, it's Tobago."
Hmm.
And and so they'll know about World Cup, or they'll know about Miss Universe, or they'll know about our achievements. And another thing to mention too. Is the steel pan. So a lot of people, when they hear the steel pan, they don't know that Trinidad was where the steel pan was born, was created, and they usually associate that with Jamaica or Bahamas because they've done a great job at
Hmm.
marketing. So I say that
Right.
into um, to transition into our end in Trinidad. I feel like one of the reasonings for people maybe not knowing about us, although we have such a lot of things to offer, such a large carnival and so many various contributions to this 20th century, we haven't done a good job at marketing and branding our own things to put Trinidad on the map.
Hmm.
And within you, our country, I think people don't necessarily look at, oh, what did a Black man create? What did a East Indian person of East Indian descent create? I think we just look
Hmm.
at, we are Trinidadian. It's only when we step
Okay.
outside of Trinidad that we have to clearly identify and say, okay, well, we're Afro-Caribbean, we're Afro-Trinidadian,
Right.
and make that distinction.
I mean, that's interesting, and I'm glad that you talked about a little bit about the steel pan. And just for people who don't know, steel pan is an instrument, right? Usually
Mm-hmm.
in like reggae, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
just for clarification for people who may not have known that.
You'll see it in
But yeah,
reggae, you'll
people
see
would
it
think
in.
when they hear that sound,
Mm-hmm. You'll hear it in reggae, you'll hear it in soca,
yeah, when they
or
hear,
you'll, yeah.
mhm, when they hear that sound, they will think Jamaica, or they'll think Caribbean first. But usually, when people think Caribbean, they think
They think
Jamaica,
Jamaica.
especially
Yeah.
here in the U.S. because Jamaica had those commercials. They advertised like "Come to Jamaica," and they did a good job of publicizing themselves, and they were
Mm-hmm.
always represented in film and television and things like that. And that
Mm-hmm.
has a lot to do with people knowing about the existence of a place, representation in media. Just like when Mariama was talking, when when we think about West Africa or Africa, those of us who even do know specific countries in Africa, we know things like Sierra Leone because of movies like Blood Diamond. We know different places because of certain elements and certain things of seeing them. People know about Senegal now because of Akon. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
always about representation, about how often people from that place are even spoken about and seen in media. And one of the largest elements that I've heard from just talking to and listening to a lot of Afro-Latino people is that they don't get represented even in their countries. Like when you look at a telenovela, even if there are, a plethora of black male and female actors and actresses trying to get roles on those shows, they don't get hired unless it's in like a demeaning role of like maybe a maid or something like that, or housekeeper. And so when people aren't seen, when people aren't represented, people feel invisible. People feel as if they don't exist. And I want to, throw a curveball in here just right quick to talk about, what media representation does for people and how important it is. And I want to, go to Kim quickly because I know Say came out with a visual album very recently in partnership with Disney called Black is King.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many different think pieces and thoughts about the representation of Africa and the representation of what blackness is as it relates to that piece of art. So I know Kim had a special perspective that she wanted to share about that. Are you prepared to share with us what your thoughts are, Kim?
Yes, I can because I actually spoke about this on Touch Radio last Monday. Because yeah, they also called
Hmm.
me and asked me what I thought about the criticism of Black is King, and I find it very interesting
Right.
because I do like part of my job is actually make people aware about media representations and their effects, but also how media can
Hmm.
educate people or broaden the scope of people's imagination. And I find it very interesting
Right.
that
Right.
actually people were criticizing Beyonce for romanticizing the continent of Africa. And I'm not saying that it's
Hmm.
not important to tell different stories. Also, unfortunately, the awful things that are going on the continent, like in Zimbabwe. But I also told that radio interview, it's a popular culture text. So you have to put it in the context of popular culture. Beyonce is not like a politician. She cannot overthrow systems. So what she was trying to do is actually use popular culture to, in my opinion, uplift West African designers, dancers, artists, and also, um, um, yeah, like an imaginative storytelling to show people how it actually can be. And I couldn't understand why people actually criticize that. And next to that, she also was criticized by a quote unquote appropriating African culture. at first that's like very broad because Africa consists of different countries. So which country or which culture was she appropriated according to the critics? But also with that, I said in an interview that Beyonce is African American, so her lineage is more direct to the African continent. Like for me, I have Suriname, so my ancestors were actually brought from West Africa to Suriname. So I actually have also like broad Surinamese culture or an important Surinamese culture. And I do think that it's important to also put it in that context that Beyonce doesn't have like another culture than her ties, her felt ties with West Africa and her culture in the United States. So to me, again, I always support people being critical because I do think that you always have to be like a critical thinker and viewer of media text. But in this regard, we should applaud her, I think, because she actually uplifted a lot of African artists and designers.
Right, and she actually
Yeah.
consulted other people in the project, and so it was just interesting that you said that she got criticized for culturally appropriating Africa when we are descendants of Africa, and that is our lineage and our ancestry, and it just shows the disconnect that's there, and the mindset of people and how separated we are. Because I don't, from a person from my point of view, being African American, and hearing someone, because I want to embrace my lineage and my ancestry because it has been, lost. Like the direct lineage I can't find. I don't know directly what, line I come from or what ethnicity I come from. So if I want to identify with, I know I'm from that continent, so I want to identify with different elements of it, and I want to try to embrace as much of it as possible. To be told that I am appropriating a culture, and appropriation is, linked to stealing, or almost taking on in a disrespectful manner, it's baffling. So
It is.
I know I want to. So the people on here, so there are people on the panel who haven't yet seen Black is King, but there are people on the panel who have. And but even if you haven't seen it, just from the criticism of what you've heard, you may be able to chime in a little bit. So if you have, thoughts that you want to share, I want to open the floor, and you can just, raise your index finger, and I'll go to you so you can, share your thoughts about, how that, what you think. Is that Yama? Okay, so Mariama, you can go
Yeah.
ahead and tell us what your thoughts were.
So I'm gonna go with my talk on the view of the African, and the the idea that Beyonce showed in the videos. I think calling it appropriation is a little bit wrong because it's her culture too. So she has the right to share her culture, to learn her culture, and try to share the same way she learned it to other people who do not know what it is, or she shared the way she knew it. She know it, and as an African, I might say that I can say that it might be some uh it might be shared not exactly the right way, or the real culture, because everybody knows that African culture is diversified. We have a lot of communities that have their specific culture, like their specific traditions, and all of that. And it's something really sensitive to be able to share at that point. So, as a conservative, that is my culture, and when I saw the whole thing, I appreciate the idea that what she was going on, but identified that as the African culture globally is a little bit scratchy for me. I know she did what she can, and somebody else can go on some another aspect of the culture of Africa. And I think the process, the idea that she moved, it did not represent the whole Africa as it says, the all the communities, and definitely she won't be able to represent everybody, all the communities in Africa, because it's so rich and diversified. Some countries have a lot of things in common, but we have something different as well. So I felt like she represented uh, the African American that is the people who look in their way back to Africa, to motivate them more to go see, to go check what she saw when she went to Africa. But it do not represent the African to valorize our culture. Is it is that how I felt. I felt it's a little bit scratchy. It's a little bit partial on the representation of Africa, and the, the 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 criticism that went around it was a little bit too hard. We need to appreciate her gesture for sure, and try to pull more people to contribute, to put more light on the continent, because here what it is a lot of people in the States think when you say Africa, it's a country. It's a country. They did not realize that Africa is a continent that have a lot of countries. So this is the way we need to go for. Show people that Africa is rich, diversified, and it is a continent.
So, and I wanted to, just piggyback on what your statement. So you were saying that you appreciate the effort,
Yeah.
but you feel like the criticisms were too harsh. But even from your own standpoint, from your cultural standpoint, you saw elements in there that were kind of that you didn't think represented the whole of Africa. And what I'll say to
Yeah.
that is, it's just one piece of art, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't expect this one work to represent the
To cover
entirety
everything.
of the content, right? And so this one piece of art from this one person's perspective can only represent so much. And I believe, like you said, the effort that has been put in is to try to give people access to other realms about Africa. Because I think we
Okay.
see a lot of the struggle, we see a lot of the needs of Africa. We see that constantly. That's what's constantly being fed to us. But we never see that there is access to prosperity or beauty or other elements that would make people want to come and even
Yeah.
engage and learn more. And also I do believe that, like, if you listen to the like in between the songs and even in the lyrics of the songs, there's dialogue and like monologue in between the lyrics of the songs that try to tie in that when she says black is king, she's not only talking about like royalty in the sense of governing bodies and monarchy, and not saying that she places all the values of black worthiness or black excellence in monarchs. It was about black being identified in the dictionary as negative. And every
Yeah.
time you have black as a pre in front of anything, black magic, black this, black luck, anything that was black was always identified as negative. So she put
Mm-hmm.
black as king to identify that there's greatness with it, but it's not tied to a political structure. It was tied to a mentality, a spiritual, awakening type thing. And so, and I believe that she tried to consult with as many various cultures in there. They had representation from the Dogon, they had representation from, different parts of Nigeria, representation from South Africa, representation from East Africa. And so she tried to
West
show the
Africa as well.
diversity, but also, it's
Mhm.
that's what I'm saying. The Dogon are from West Africa. That she had those masks there. She had so many different representations in there, and
Mhm.
she also consulted with artists from the continent.
For
Yemi
everywhere,
Alade
yeah.
is in there. You have Tiwa Savage on there. You have a lot of different artists who have contributions to the work, and they actually consulted with the representation. So, you know, it's just interesting that we find a reason to overly criticize this effort when everybody in the first question we just talked about how very little we as Black people know about one another.
Yep.
When Sharon
So,
tells people in the United States that she's from Peru, they question her and are confused. And it's
so
pretty much
this,
the
I
same with
wanna just,
everybody on this.
I wanna
Go
just
ahead.
add something to that. This education of that we going on right here is really
Hmm.
important because even the Black people that's here. So I'm gonna give you two examples. At a
Hmm.
networking event, I met a little boy who was an author. He was with his father. They have this cartoon book with Black people and all of that, and trying to tell the story. But one thing I did not
Right.
understand, they was promoting that book to show the value of Black people. And when I talked to the boy realized my accent. And he asked me,
Hmm.
where you from? I said, I'm from West Africa. He said, okay. I said, what do you know about Africa? He said, oh, that's the continent where is a lot of animal. I, I told his father, I said, please stop promoting your book and teach your son something about Africa first. Because you cannot promote a book that value is promoting Black people, showing the value of Black people, while the person who wrote the book know nothing about Africa, a continent where is animal. I said, darling, there's people in Africa too. I said, there's people in Africa. We have
Well,
cars, we have nice houses. We are trying to tell the fact. I say, you need to, the kid need to learn something to show more value of his book. And other than that,
mhm.
while I was doing the ride share, a Black girl told me to go back to my continent. I said, darling, I'm not mad because at least I know where I'm coming from. If they kick out all the Black people from America, I have somewhere to go back to. You don't know where you're from. Where will you go back to? I say, I'm sorry for you. I feel really sorry for you because you don't know you don't know where you're coming from. You're not from here. You need to learn that first to be able to talk to people. You cannot tell people that to go back, Black as you, to go back to their continent like you're from the States. So all this is a
Kezia,
really
you wanted to
great,
chime in?
yeah.
Um, I like all the points. I haven't
Go ahead,
seen
Kay.
Black is King. Um, and just knowing what type of media and content that Beyonce does, I know that her work ethic is top notch, and she does strive to make sure that she does her research and she does a lot of collaboration and making sure everyone is represented well from just the things that she has done thus far. Um, as far as the whole like cultural appropriation, I have heard that sentiment before from Africans. One person in particular, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, she's from Liberia, and her feelings about cultural appropriation definitely stems from the Liberian history and what they experienced with the migration of African Americans going to Liberia. So, and in that breath, she feels as though it's too late. It's too late for Black people to feel as though they are from the continent, because now it's not about them truly feeling like they're from the continent, but more so it's just popular, because now we have Wakanda forever. Now we have, these taglines of Black is beautiful or whatever, and it's not for her. She feels as though it's a cultural appropriation because they're not doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it because it's popular. Because when she came to America, she did hear things like what Yama was speaking about, where it's like, oh, why don't you go back to your country? Oh, why you African booty scratcher? Or just so many derogatory terms from the people that looked like her. So when you have that experience, and that has been the majority of your experience up until now that it's become popular, then like, of course they're going to think that it's cultural appropriation because it's out of convenience. Now, in regards to Beyonce, as long as credit is given where it's due, I'm okay with the representation that she's given. Again, I have not seen the video, but it's sort of like, based on what Kim was saying, as far as it being pop culture. So it's sort of like if someone was to come to America and they want to identify with Black culture, even people like, what's the gentleman name on The Daily Show?
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah. He's openly spoke about his desire. He loves just, the Black culture in America and the terms and the things that we do. It's based on an individual experience. If someone comes to Trinidad, they're going to have a particular experience about what happened. So she's just documenting. It's almost like a travel video. She's documenting what her experience is. So I agree that the criticism may be too heavy, but at the same time, in general, just like Yama was saying, I think it's important that we definitely make sure we educate ourselves about African culture so that it does not come off disingenuous and it does not become cultural appropriation.
Right. And I do believe that there is a thin line. So being African American, I am very aware that there's a tendency, if you are an oppressed person, to start to take on the attributes of your oppressor without knowing it, because that's your education. You're educated in their system of what is leadership, of what is every masculinity, femininity is defined by their majority culture and how they implement it into what we learn in school. So I am very aware of the history of African Americans going to Liberia and going over there with a colonist mindset. They came over there thinking like colonizers instead of thinking like neighbors, instead of thinking like co-investors. And so they felt like because they were coming from America, because they were descendants of, the enslaved, that something was owed to them, and it was owed to them from the people who were already there. And that's a wrong mindset. And that's something that can happen when things just become popular and there's no education to go along with it. But I also want to say that, the little boy that Mariama alluded to, when I grew up, the only image, so we had a program called National Geographic Explorer, and they would go around the world and they would show how different people around the world live. And this was like an educational platform. And so when they went to South America or Mexico, they showed the markets, they showed the culture, they showed how people interacted with each other. They did the same thing when they went to China, when they went to Eastern Europe, when they went to Western Europe. When they went to Africa, we saw lions and zebras and giraffes. And this is what I saw growing up. What cultivated my hunger for Africa, however, was movies, me seeing myself represented in media. It was Shaka Zulu, it was Roots, it was me putting the pieces together of that. Kente came from Africa, and that's how we as Black people got over here. Shaka is in Africa, but he ran a kingdom, and that means that Black people at some point in history were actually in power, and it wasn't in relationship to Europeans. I needed that imagery to even, give me the hunger to want to know more. So while we're saying at the same time that, we can't fall all the way into the popular culture, if it's not, if we are not reflected, if we don't see ourselves, we won't think that we exist. And so as African Americans, I am I am sympathetic to them, because at the same time, Yama had a horrible experience where this young lady who was ignorant said some horrible things to her, right? And then your friend Kaysia had some people who said some horrible things to them. But as an African American who has identified with Africa since like the 6th grade, I've been told by people from the continent that I'm not African, that I should stop pretending, that, all of these things without any aggressiveness on my part, but it's them holding on to something and holding it over my head. So there is wrong being done on all sides, which is why it was the impetus of this very dialogue. What started the African Diaspora Dialogue is because I realized that there were these myths and there was miseducation on all sides. Because growing up in America, I thought just the African Americans were ignorant and that we needed to know more about Africa. But what I grew to realize, especially in my travels, is that people in Africa don't know much about us and our history either from here. They don't know all of the advancements that we've made from the time of enslavement. And then, like, the things that happened to Black Wall Street to tear it down, because I've interacted with people from the Caribbean as well as people from the continent of Africa that will just say African Americans are wasting, all of the access to the United States because they haven't done anything the whole time that they've been over here. They're just lazy and they do nothing without knowing the full breadth of the history, which is why today we're talking about unity and the importance of it and how it can be conducted. So I want to blend into the next question, and I want to know, like, what is the purpose of having a global African perspective? And when I say global African perspective, that means defining your Blackness not just by where you come from, but by also being willing to learn about the other regions of the African diaspora, to know the fullness of what has happened with those people, how far they have come. Like, how can that get us to this desired unity that I've read about so long? I want to see it in action. So we're going to start with Kaysia, and you tell us, like, what would be the purpose of that?
Um, the purpose of it is so that we can continue to make the achievements that um, that are necessary for our evolution as Black people, as African-centered people. I do believe that um, we are exactly where we need to be at this time. A lot of people believe that we haven't come far enough or we haven't done enough, but it's time for us now, as we transition from the surface level of knowing about Black pop culture or just knowing about African pop culture. It's good to see
Mm-hmm.
those things that to remind us of who we are and remind us of the genius that is Black people. I think it's good to continue to bridge that gap so that it's a reminder that we have a long way to go, but we are exactly where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah, we have a
okay to
long way to
move
go,
forward.
but we've come afar.
We've come afar. We have come a long way, and the introduction is that pop culture. The introduction is that surface level thing. But now let's dig deeper. Let's learn about the contributions, like you said, that Black people in America have made. Let's learn about the contributions that the Caribbeans. Ancestors have made. Let's learn about the contributions that African made, and they continue to make, and let's see how we can utilize all of our strengths, because our differences is what makes up the beauty of what African people are.
Right. And I want to go to Sharon. I lived in Peru for a minute, and one of the first things I did when I got to Peru is I went to the Afro Peruvian Museum, and what I saw was nobody was there. Like they didn't even have like a curator, and it was just like if you got there on a certain day and the museum door was open, then you could go and see. But I wanted to know the history of African people in Peru and the contributions. So, like, what are your thoughts on the purpose of having a global African perspective, of bridging that gap, in your opinion, Sharon?
Hmm. Okay, so yes, it's really sad what happens with the Afro-Peruvian Museum in Lima. It
Mm,
has long periods of being non-active, so it's actually not even a site of reference for most of us.
hmm.
But well, I was trying to comment on the last question about black skin,
Go
um,
ahead.
but I can tie it up to this as well because it's
Hmm.
related. Mm, I think a gap we need to bridge is to build a bridge over is this link between blackness and Africanness. And
Hmm.
I don't think we have made a difference in this conversation, or if people usually um, take the time to build how are these two identities related, and why is it important, or how is it important to understand Africanness in relation to our blackness, almost independently of where we live or where we are from. And what I mean by this is, for instance, in Peru, we are not only stigmatized for being black, but for our Africanness,
Hmm.
for
Right.
our blackness carries a stigma because it resembles Africa, and it resembles
Hmm.
our African past. It resembles slavery, enslavement. It resembles
Right.
oppression, right? And on the other hand,
Hmm.
in Peru, particularly, where we have been denied to practice our spiritual traditions, right? We have Afro-Peruvian music, but we don't carry something that it's explicitly African. If you, I think Mariama said like, oh yes, if I have to go back somewhere, I know where I'm going to. But in Peru, we don't even know where. Like nobody knows. I heard how Kim said like, oh yes, in Suriname we come from West Africa. In Peru, we don't know that. We just know that our blackness is tied to this Africanness uh, via enslavement, right? So I think in order to bridge the gap, we also need to decolonize what we understand by
Hmm.
Africanness and and of course blackness.
Right. And yeah, I agree. And those terms get conflated because they are used so interchangeably, so often in political speak, that just us over here as speaking as an African American, we just took on the term of black and whatever else it is that they call us at any moment, and we start to turn what they meant as a negative into a positive. So we turn black into a political term, and like even if you take into like research writing, when we write the word black when it's in reference to the people, is capitalized because it is a political term. But when you write the word white in reference to the people, it's not. And so we take it and we try to take ownership over what people try to hold over our heads. And I wanted to make sure that it's clear that in this conversation, when we're talking about having a global African perspective and the ways and the purpose of it, from my standpoint, and in the work that I do, even cultivating these conversations, I believe it's important because we have such a lack of information, and we're giving information about why we're so different and why we should, insulate ourselves. But what it does is it opens up us for more exploitation, for more opportunities to be oppressed, because the people who are doing those acts know that, okay, if the people in the United States if the black people in the US only see themselves as black in that context, and then if the black people in Peru feel isolated, and the black people in Trinidad feel isolated, and the black people in the Netherlands feel isolated, then they won't come to each other's aid, and they won't care or know what's happening when we go to Guinea and we take all of the gold and the bauxite. We don't have to hear from African Americans because they don't know and they don't care because we've isolated them from one another. When we go to Trinidad and we take whatever the natural resources are, sugarcane or whatever it may be, and we give back, like, right, we take the petroleum, and we say, okay, in exchange for 80% of the petroleum, we'll build a new road, but the road is no good after 3 years. And so they've gotten over again, and it continues to happen, again and again, because we're so isolated from one another, because we identify our distinctions over our commonalities, then we expose ourselves to be completely vulnerable at every point. And that is what I'm trying to, like, build with having conversations like these. And really, I want people to be able to vent all of the things that you have actually felt, realities of how even we as black people deal with one another, because we can't even look at them until we can look at ourselves in the mirror and actually say, all right, I'm messed up. I had a wrong perspective. I've been taught wrong and intentionally educated with misinformation, which is so dangerous, because once you educate somebody, I always say that miseducation is more dangerous than no education, because a person with zero knowledge, when you give them knowledge, is their first time getting anything, so they'll usually take it. But somebody who feels like they've gone through school and they've been highly educated, if you try to present them with new knowledge that's counter to what they've been awarded for learning, they're going to fight against it. If you tell somebody that everything that everybody has ever taught you your whole life is wrong, it's going to be difficult for somebody to accept that new information. It's going to take some time to really to deal with, okay, so either everybody who taught me lied to me, or they didn't know themselves. And coming to that realization on either end is a hard pill to swallow. And so I would just say, coming at this from a stance of love and understanding, and identifying the lack of knowledge that you yourself had. Like, everybody reflect on, from where you're from, how much did you really know about Black people from other areas? And if you can't say that you in your formal education learned a lot, then you have to give that same bit of grace to the other people about not knowing about where you're from. Not saying that you have to take crap and negativity from people, right? You don't have to stand and be insulted, but also know that, okay, that person just doesn't know. I'm not going to be around people like that, but go find the people who do know, because there are people who are forward thinking. We can't spend a lot of time, dealing and babysitting the people who aren't ready to know yet, but always leaving the room for them to know. I think it was you, Kaysia, who said that your Liberian friend feels like it's too late. That means that there is no room for growth anymore. There's no room for us to ever get to it's too late for us. Like, do you know the trauma that we've been through as African Americans trying to grasp? Like, and I'll just say this, and then I'll flip it back and I'll go on to the next question. But if you look at right after the abolition of enslavement in the United States, if you look at every institution that we built, African was in the name. It wasn't the United Black Bank. It was the African Bank. It was the United African Methodist Church. It was the African this, African that. And just about every single thing that we built coming right out of enslavement. And we're talking about 300 plus years of being separated from our origin and being told that we can't read and we can't speak our own languages and all of what we lost. But immediately after enslavement, we were longing for Africa. It wasn't until they allowed us into their education system that we started to kind of lose that a little bit. So just knowing that information is important for people from the Caribbean, people from Africa, people who are African American, people who are Afro-Latino, people from who are Black living in Europe, knowing all of the different aspects of what's happening, because we make assumptions about each other and we accept these myths that come from sources want to keep us divided intentionally, because they know once we are isolated from one another, we're vulnerable to continuously be exploited. So my next question is, how does unity look to you? And is it possible? Is unity across the African diaspora possible? And how would that look to you? And we'll start with Yama.
So to go to that question, I want to go back a little bit, because
no problem.
In the state, they did not teach you Africa before slavery. In the continent, we start learning history before the slavery. So we knew that the Africans have structures, we have organization, and we were structured right that was making all the kingdom working well. They taught us how slavery started. They taught us how they did to put our self-esteem, our confidence down, to be able to divide us, to be able to more implant the slavery in Africa. They taught us how the slaves that got brought to America was working in the plantation and others. So the same way African American feel like they lost something. They got Africa owned them something. We feel like something got taken from us. So to the point that we have to learn to know that the loss have been both ways.
Right.
The loss have been both ways. They use the power to undervalue the African minds, to put down our self-esteem, and that is happening still now. The in French they call it complex d'inferiority.
Inferiority complex is the same.
Yes. So inferiority complex is still happening to the days, because if you see all the illegal immigration, is because we still think the other continent are great than Africa. When another a white person go to Africa, the person can have less degrees than us. The person can have less money than us. But once he got to our continent, he felt like he's right here and all the other Africans are here. And we let them do it. Because that's how we're gonna say we let them do it. Why? Because it built in the minds that we have to follow and try to make them so comfortable because they have something to teach us. But when you check the deeply, we know better than them. We know them better than them. We're more cultivated than them. We more uh we have everything more than them. So we need to work on that self-esteem back. They define the borders for us. They define the African borders for us. We did have borders before enslavement because all those kingdoms know where their land starts, where their land stops. And once the enslavement started, they redefines what was the beginning of a country, what was the end of a country. And that was not the first structure that we had. And to be able to connect better, we need to reconnect to know, to redefine our borders, because honestly, Africa is, we have so much in common that like Guinea, Mali, Senegal, we have a lot of cultures that is similar. The Fulani, you can find them everywhere. The Mandingo, you can find them everywhere. We speak the same language. We have the same culture. So until we redefine our borders, our priorities, and where we're going, and share, like Jamal said, we have so much in common that we value more the differences other than looking at the common sense that we have. So once we differ, we realize that the common that we have, the things that we have in common, have to unify us more. We cannot go forth. But I think the base of unity is first to know who we are, what we have in common, where we're coming from. Then we can define where we're going and how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I agree. And Kim, I want to pose the same question to you. Do you, what, is unity across the African diaspora possible? Because there are people who don't believe that it is.
Ooh,
So it's a fair
yeah,
question. Is it
it
possible?
is.
And how does it look?
Okay, so I am going to start with how does it look? And I do
Okay.
think it looks like also some type of global self-esteem building. And I'm not saying that it isn't not there, but I do feel that some people of the African diaspora don't know enough about the history before enslavement. So I do think when more people are aware of that history, what actually make the world go round in that era, people will actually have like a higher self-esteem because they realize that our history doesn't start with the enslavement. I also feel that African Americans don't know how much they actually make the popular culture world go round. And of course, there are more things that I can credit African Americans on, but sometimes it surprises me that when I go to the United States, African Americans are not aware of how they are trendsetters on so many levels. And I do feel if there's more unity and African Americans understand what kind of role they play in the global popular culture, and of course more eras, they will also get increased self-esteem. I also feel that
Mm.
unity looks like economically building or building economically. So I do feel like if we support each other's economic endeavors more, we can actually build economically, and that will also give us more leverage when it also comes to injustices. Like if we come together and, for instance, some things happen in the United States or in the Netherlands or in Peru, and the people who are actually doing
Mm-hmm.
the injustices know that we don't, not only the black people from Peru will stand up, but also people in the Netherlands, in the United States, and other countries,
Right.
we have more leverage. And I
Mm-hmm.
do feel we need some type of code. I do think that we should
Mm.
realize that we don't have to respond on everything in public. And I'm not saying that black people can't
Right.
criticize each other. Again, criticism is important. In that way, you can grow.
Mhm.
But sometimes you can just shut the F up. And I'm sorry for my harshness, but sometimes I hear like criticism from other black people. I'm like, yeah, you could sit this one out. It's not necessary. It always gonna divide us, and people from outside is gonna see, how we are not in tune with each other. And lastly,
Right.
just to go back to Black is King for 1 minute because I forgot it. What
Mm-hmm.
Beyonce did with Black is King, I think is also important for young Black women all around the globe. Because in the song My Power, for instance, she also talked about how proud she is on nappy hair, her skin tone, or like the different shades of skin tone of the African diaspora, that you should refer to Black
Mm-hmm.
women as goddesses. And I do feel that when you
Mm-hmm.
juxtapose it to Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, who actually came out with a song yesterday, and I'm not going to criticize her. I think there's also space for raunchiness and like open sexuality, but I do feel we need some type of balance. And I do think that the images that Beyonce is producing right now could actually balance that out and could, um, how to say it again, it's good for young Black women's selves also. Yeah, period.
Yeah.
I'm gonna end it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's there's space and room for all of that representation, but it's funny how people will overly criticize the positive representation, but then happily accept that other form, right? And
Mm.
it's not to look down on them with WAP or you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
so Sharon, the same question to you. How does unity look? And before we even get to how does unity look, is unity across the African diaspora even possible? And if so, how does it look?
Oof. Well, I think it's a challenge. We have to recognize that.
Hmm.
I I agree with what Kim just said. Like um, criticism, for instance, is one of those challenges we face. So for that, I think unity would, how can I say this? So the first thing to start building unity is dialogue, as you said before, Jamal. So I think that as long as we start talking about it, talking about how we are united in our Africanness, we can start shaping that unity. Like it's an ongoing process more than a final step where we are all united and we all agree and we all um, have the resources to help each other, because that's other thing. Like mm, for a long time we've been talking about black people in South America, for instance, as minorities, right? So we are minorities in each of our
Hmm.
countries, and I'm going to add the US in this. So we are minorities in each of our countries, but then if you add up all of us, we're actually a great group of people. We are a lot. The diaspora is significantly big, significantly great. So I think that that's another way in which unity would look like. Would look like
Hmm.
us recognizing that we're actually not a minority. It's just that we have been minoritized, I guess, subalternized, in order to take power away from us. So I think that the more united we are, or even if we start raising awareness about, yes, we are united, we can be united, we can start talking about it, it's going to be powerful, even for our leadership, right? Our own leadership like in our communities. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love what you said about us not being a minority. Because if you look around and you count us globally, we are not a minority. We are far from it. And just even Africa as a continent can swallow Europe multiple times. And so for them to even put in our mind that we're a minority and we accept it and we even embrace that term and use it to represent ourselves is is a bamboozlement. Kaysia, same question for you. Is African diasporic unity possible? If so, how does it look?
Okay. Breonna Taylor. Forgive them for they know not what they do. I think
Mm,
to go back to some of the things that were mentioned earlier in
right.
the hurts that we've had amongst our diaspora, from the hurtful words
Hmm.
and the hurtful things, we must find a level of forgiveness to our common
Right.
brother and diaspora sisters, that they do not know what they're doing. They're
Mm,
not aware of the matrix that they have been placed in. And but there's an awakening happening. There's an awakening happening with our people, and that even here in Trinidad. So stepping back for a second. So we in Trinidad, we rarely use the term black. We will use the term black
hmm
and now and then, and a lot of the times we do use the term black, it would be from an external source. But I've been told in America that I'm not black, because black is an American term. It's they've held on to it. It's something that belongs to America, and African American, and we use the term Afro a lot. Um, and
hmm
and when we identify, for me, I identify as an Afro-Caribbean woman, an
hmm
African soul, an African spirit. And so, to hear that someone is telling me that I'm not black, but then I try to figure out, okay, what is blackness? What is Africanness? And it just leaves a sense of
hmm
confusion. And in order to move beyond this, we must do our individual, because, like I said, there's an awakening happening, right? So we must do our individual and um, our internal work, because our unity lies in the transformation. The transformation lies in our individual transformation. African liberation lies in our internal, our inner liberation. Our unity lies in our internal unity. Once we're able, you cannot conquer something externally if you haven't conquered the things that you have internally. So there's a lot of individual work that we must know who we are. We must know that we matter. We must know that our history that is beyond or um, before enslavement. We must know these things. We must know the great things that has come as a result of enslavement. The What African Americans have created is unique. No other group of people have been able to create what African American, despite what African Americans have gone through, right?
Mm.
And even throughout the rest of the diaspora as well. And so we must distinguish and declare that we're going to release ourselves from the religious programming, the educational programming, and concentrate on our own self healing and our own self transformation, so that we become balanced vibrational beings that can therefore make the changes externally. And we also, I think something is important that we must mention in this conversation is that we have to also dispel the failures, the failures and the wrongdoings of those people on the continent and globally who have tried to implement Pan-Africanism and yet has utilized the same strategies as the oppressors. We must be able to look beyond, look at what they have done, look at what the strive of them being, of what they've created, and say, okay, what works and what doesn't work. Because unfortunately, you do have powerful leaders who decide that, yeah, we're going to be Pan-Africanists, we're going to move forward, we're going to do this. And then they come and just take over our land and decide that they're going to rule it the same way as the oppressors. And this has been evident throughout Africa, throughout the global diaspora. And again, I'll just end with this thing. I think the way that we're able to exercise unity is through supporting Black people, educating ourselves. So, Yama, I implore you and I invite you to share with us what is some history before enslavement. What are the books? What are the stories that we can read and learn about? Because unfortunately, that's not something that's given to us. That's something that we have to search for. And sometimes that's information that may be skewed a little bit because we may not have written our own histories, or the ones that we have written has been destroyed and manipulated. Another thing that we can do is sharing the knowledge that we have, growing our sense of being, and growing our neighborhoods and communities, just like what you're trying to do on this diaspora dialogue, and doing things like cleaning up the neighborhood and connecting with our neighbors. So
I would like to add.
I mean, it's very.
I would like to add one more thing. Like Africa as the continent, we need to stop to ask the other continent for validation, because until we stop doing that, anytime we ask for validation in anything, any project, there's something that happened, because they won't let us go through our project, because if Africa unites, it's bad for the other continent. Europe, a country of Europe, if they have a project of development, they won't come to Africa to ask our validation. They're going to ask each other in the continent for validation and go through with their project. And every single African country, if they have a project of development, they go for validation in the other continent. And most of the time, those projects never come through, because that means that country is going to get developed. We won't not need them anymore to transform our rich resources. We're going to have to use or transform our own resources. So the Europe or the America won't benefit on that. So they won't let us go through with our own project. So we need to stop asking for validation. We need to ask each other to lift each other so we can grow. Because the development that Guinea don't have, maybe Senegal have it. Maybe Angola have it. So if we work together and validate each other, lift each other, Africa gonna grow. But if we take our development to Europe or to America, they will never let us go through with that. The example, go through all the countries that had war or that have some type of problem politically or something like that. There's a development that is projecting started to pull off the population of the poverty. So we need to get together, validate each other, and lift each other so we can grow together and more be unified. So for me, the how the unity is going to be possible is first to stop asking for validation to other country, to other continent, and validate each other in Africa. we are big enough, diversified enough, rich enough to be able to grow together and biggest than all other continents.
And to add to that, Yama, I think
Yeah,
from the
and
Caribbean perspective,
go
I
ahead.
believe, I'm sorry. So from the Caribbean's perspective, adding to that is like we are importing things that we should not be importing. We have
Exactly.
enough resources on our
Mm,
land to
Yeah.
grow. So right now, Trinidad, unfortunately, and I'm ashamed to say, we're importing cocoa. That could never happen. That should never
Yeah.
happen. In the days of Eric Williams, who was our first prime minister, those things were looked at and said, we have resources here. We have the ability to grow cocoa. We should be the number one cocoa provider for the Caribbean. You know,
Yep.
we have something called the CARICOM here, where we communicate with the Caribbean, other Caribbean islands, and it's like I guess like the UN of the Caribbean in a way, and essentially like
mhm.
we should be working together closely with our neighboring Caribbean islands to say, okay, you grow this, I'm going to grow this, and we're going to export this to the world together. But
Yeah,
that doesn't
exactly.
happen because there's this continuous like snake and crab in a barrel kind of thing
Hmm.
where we don't want to see each other grow, or we don't want to see each other be prosperous because it's a selfish gain. And again, that's why I say there's an importance individually as ourselves and as countries and as just
So,
these neighborhoods that we definitely make sure we know that we're as strong as our weakest link. So we must know that we need to develop ourselves before we say, oh, let's go to the world and say who we are. We need to develop ourselves.
so that mindset was so implanted to our mind that is before you connected to with your own brother to make riches, you can go out and look at someplace else, then seeing the potential that you have in your own house. We need to look at
Yes.
each other. We need to see the potential that we have. Like you say, you grow this, okay, I grow it. I cannot transform it, but my neighbor can transform it. Send it to your neighbor to transform it. You share the benefit. You grow, they grow. We grow together so that can more open us to greatness. So until our leaders learn to trust each other in the continent first before they trust other people outside the continent,
Mm.
it won't work. And at the moment that unity start happening in the continent, it will be more open to all the African, all the Black people in the world to be able to embrace that same sympathy, to be able to. We have potential. If you take all the rich people in Africa, all the rich people are Black in America or in Europe, because look in Europe, example, they have in the museum, maybe I cannot go in percentage because I don't have the numbers right, but we have a lot of our culture thing in the museum, and they call it about keeping it for. We don't need them to keep it for us. It's ours. Give it back. It's been stolen from us. Give it back. Okay, we want to have it in a room closed. We don't want to show it. It's ours. We do with it what we want to do it with it. You don't have to make us pay taxes in our own money. They say,
Mm.
okay, we giving back to Africa this amount of money. You giving back like this is donation, this is grant, this is this. Those not grants because they give us grants. They take 150% of back in resources because they're not taking our resources
Mhm.
in the right value. So that is an invisible
Yep.
hand hiding behind those brains that I never believed in. So we need to open our eyes and realize, evaluate if we still taking those grants or if we transform our own resources, how much we're gonna get from the resources and see which one is the better one. And I believe transforming our resources, getting the money that is from our resources will be 3 times or 4 times more than all those fake grants or loans that Africa is taking from the other continent that we have to pay back again and again, and the population is not getting anything from all of that.
Yeah, I mean, and all of that is true. And like Bob Marley had a song called Africa Unite, and it said, Africa Unite because your children want to come home, right?
Mm.
And so we do need certain unification on the continent itself so that there are, things in place. But I believe there is mobilization toward that. But I think that we in the diaspora have a role to play as well. And if you know history, there have been moments in time where there's been like Pan-African movements and unity to overthrow certain systems. Like apartheid was overthrown partly because African Americans got aware of what was happening and took it on as our fight, and like it was happening to us, and we made sure that we made as much noise about it as we possibly could, like it was happening directly to us. The same thing with the independence movements in Africa, where you will hear testimony from people like Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta saying they were inspired to go fight for independence after seeing what was happening with African Americans fighting for freedom here in the United States. And so there are so many examples of people in the diaspora doing things to influence one another, as well as drawing influence from our homeland of Africa. So there's that we all have to do, we all have a part to play. This conversation, the Afrikan Diaspora Dialogue, is here to bring to our awareness what it is that we're missing, and to really give us an opportunity to have a conversation with one another. The beautiful thing about this technology is that we can have people on who are still in their different places in their countries and talk at present about what's happening there, so we can have real world connections to one another and know what's happening in Trinidad, know what's going on in Peru, know the realities of the Black experience in the Netherlands and in Guinea and other places like that. So we have to take advantage of the resources that we do have and make sure that we're doing something positive with it. I want to thank each and every one of you for being on the show today. All of your input was so valid. I hate that the technology was it made us lose Lawrence because we didn't get his perspective on every subject. But we'll still fight through it, and you can't always win against the internet. But I wanted to go around so that everybody can tell where they can find you, and we're gonna start with Kim. Kim, let people know how they can find you and the things that you're involved in and what you're working on.
Yes, of course. So you can find me on Instagram, realist reporter underscore KP. Yeah, it's also on the screen. Twitter at Kim underscore by Kim. My Facebook business page is Kim by Kim NLUT. And I'm a hip hop academic, media literacy expert, and period. That, yeah, done.
I appreciate you. And we'll move on to Kaysia. Tell people how they can find you.
Okay, I can be found on Instagram at the Traveling Foodista. That's the Traveling Foodista, and I am a doula, as well as a food enthusiast, as well as someone who believes that food heals you, and we can do so as a community as well as individually. I would like to end by saying, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Bob Marley, Breonna Taylor.
Mm, right. And I'm so happy that you keep saying Breonna Taylor because it's so necessary. Like we cannot forget or lose focus or lose sight of the things that we are fighting for and the injustices that we are trying to bring to light. And Sharon, tell the people the things that you're working on and ways that they can get in touch with you if possible.
Oh, okay. So yes, I feel like we cannot state enough how much we did justice for Breonna Taylor for all of us. So you can find me on Instagram as Sharun Gonzales at Sharun Gonzales. Um, and I am a communications professional, but right now I'm working in a project with women of African descent in Peru. So it's a digital project. You can also find it. It's in Spanish though, because our target is Peruvian Black women. But I guess you can find some Google Translator is all over the place. So I hope you can access the content anyway. The project is Barrer Project, and I think we can share it in the comments.
Yeah, it'll be in the description. I'll add everything. And we will end with Mariama. Let the people know how they can find you and get in touch with you.
So you
And
can
what do
find
you do?
me. I'm a fashion designer, and I try to share uh, African culture with the clothes, with valuing how we dress up, how beautiful our bright colors are. We love colors, we are colors. So I'm trying to share that culture through the clothes that I make, and as well try to help people grow cancer that is past their treatment in cancer, because that is one of my life fights, that I'm a two-time cancer survivor. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Yama Elegance, and if, on my website too at yamaelegance.com.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for being an inspiration, everybody, for the work that you do. And once again, I am T. Jamal Lee. I am the founder and executive director of Afrikan Unity Initiative. And we are a community and economic development nonprofit organization really focused on African unity, tangible, real way that you can actually some things that you can actually do. We focus on activities that actually empower people in their community to to be engaged and realize that the thoughts and ideas that they have are valid, and that by understanding that there is value in what you think and you can put those ideas into action, there's no limit to what we can accomplish. And once we grow people in their own communities, then we start to link the communities that we work with in Peru to the communities we work with in Haiti, to the communities we work with in Sierra Leone and Guinea, to Atlanta, to New York, where there is exposure to what the African realities are of our people, where we're not getting the information from third party sources. We're not depending on textbooks to teach us the reality. We will actually have real world connections with the people and full communities in these places so that we can get our information, their history, directly from the source, so that these misconceptions can go away once and for all. So if you want to get more information, please visit africanunity.us. That's www.africanunity.us. Like, follow, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's so much more content coming, and follow us on all social medias at Afrikan Unity. I want to end off by saying justice for Breonna Taylor. There is always, going to be that scrolling at the bottom of this podcast in that ticker until some results are done, and we will not give up that fight. Once again, to all my panelists, I appreciate all of you for stopping by and being, a wonderful contribution to this dialogue, and we will continue to carry it on until we get a critical mass of people who understand the importance of unity, how it's supposed to look, and at least going toward that direction. This is a great time in history where it is popular in popular culture. So we have to grasp that momentum and make sure that we do some things that sustain that energy. So until next time, we will see you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.